Hello, welcome to this video. So I am teacher Melay and we will still continue our discussion in using PSPP. So this is the same video presented in other videos. So we were actually done with some of the parts of this. So survey questionnaire, encoding, sanitizing the data, transferring the data. And now we still have two more topics to discuss, and that is analyzing the data and interpreting the tables. But for this video, our focus is only to analyze the data. So in doing this, we have to go back to the research questions. So what is what are the questions that needs to be addressed why we use the questionnaire, the life satisfaction questionnaire. So we actually have a question on the profile. So what is the profile of the respondents in terms of letter A, age, letter B, sex, letter C, relationship status, and letter D is the socioeconomic status. While for number 2, the question is what is the level of life satisfaction of the respondents? For number 3, is there a significant difference in the life satisfaction of the respondents when they are grouped according to their profile variables? So we just have two descriptive problems here, and that is problems number 1 and number 2. So for problem number 3, this can be answered using inferential statistics. So of course, our focus is to analyze the data using PSPP, which is limited only in descriptive statistics. So we will only answer question number 1 and question number 2. However, in some paper, or actually we are not encouraging to place problem on profile as part of the problem because we already have a separate section for the respondents of the study. And we place the profile of the respondents under problem number 3. So how will this be stated? So instead of placing what is the profile of the respondents as problem number 1, we simply start with what is the level and then end up with, is there a significant difference in the life satisfaction of the respondents when grouped according to the following profile variables: letter A, age, letter B, sex, and letter C and D, and of course, all the profile variables that you intend to consider in this study. And of course, the profile will still be the letter A or part A of the questionnaire that will be used for you to gather the data. Okay, so now we also need to go back. Aside from that, we also need to go back to the questionnaire. So in our questionnaire here, so we need to see again how is the data, how to analyze the data. So this is the guide. So how to analyze the data. So 1 to 1.49, extremely dissatisfied. So we need to get the mean. And then 6.5 to 7, it is extremely satisfied. So for the original data or original way on how to interpret, and that is with the use of what you call this, sum, we have also a separate video, but I presented that using Microsoft Excel. Okay, so let us also go back to the treatment of the data. So in the treatment of the data, so these are the things that you need to consider before coming up with your analysis. So you have to go back to your paper. What are the problems that needs to be solved? Why do you need, how will you answer the questions and all other stuff. Okay, so here, so what are again our problems? So let us place our problems here. So these are the problems. So what is the profile of the respondents? So let us complete this in terms of the following. So A, age, sex, relationship, status, and socio-economic status. While for number 2, what is the level of life satisfaction of the respondent? So for you to analyze this question, so if you still recall our if you still recall again, or if you watch the video on coming up with tabular or coming up with frequency count and percent when we use Microsoft Excel in analyzing our data. So of course, we have to consider again the appropriate way on how to present this. And in the presentation, so let me just reiterate it, that you can actually present our data using tabular or graphical form. Or graphical. So for graphical, so this is by presenting frequency count and percent distribution. While for, this is for tabular, I mean. For graphical, so you have to see, again, what is the appropriate for our data. Like, you have to know what is the level of measurement. So we, again, have a separate video for the discussion of the level of measurement. So here, it is actually age bracket because in our data, it is from 13 to 16 and 17 to 20. So it is age bracket. So if we ask for the actual data of age and we did not consider age bracket, then that's the time that it is the ratio. But for the case of this is not ratio, but this is ordinal data. So it's converted into ordinal. So for sex, so let us also place the classification here or the level. So as mentioned, this is ordinal. And for sex, male, female, it is nominal data. So you have to go back to all of this before you can, of course, check that you are using the correct way of how to analyze your data. So for relationship status, this is also nominal data. Socioeconomic status is ordinal data. So if you can still recall, since it's limited into nominal and ordinal, if the data is nominal or ordinal or categorical in general, the appropriate graph can be pie chart, line chart, and bar chart. So you can actually use any of this. And then in presenting it in the research paper, there is actually no need to place both tabular and graphical. So you just need to choose whether you like it to be presented using graph or if you opted to use tables for you to present it. But if you're going to use a pie chart, line chart, bar chart, it is also better if you have to place, or if you will place the labels for the data in the chart, like presenting also the frequency and the percent in the chart. So the after identifying the type of or possible way on how to present it, let us also review if we can also present this using measures of central tendency. Because remember, when we are, of course, discussing the measures of central tendency, we also made mention there that there is an appropriate measure of central tendency that can describe your data. And the best is actually based on its classification, whether it is what are the considerations that we need to assess the type of the data, whether it is nominal data, ordinal data, or at least interval data. And the other one is also the normality of the data. But since our profile variable is limited into categorical data, which is nominal and ordinal, then it means also that there's no need for us to check for the normality, because these are no longer numbers, though age is a number in general. It's already placed in a bracket form, so it becomes the ordinal. So let us just review. So for the appropriate measures of a central tendency, if our data is nominal, if you can still remember, the appropriate is mode, the highest frequency. While if your data is ordinal, the appropriate measure is median. While if it is at least interval, so that is either interval or ratio, so you are going to use mean, but that is if it is normally distributed. But if not, you are going to use median if the data is skewed. So this is our review. So after identifying what is the appropriate measure, so let us classify if in terms, for instance, for our data age 13 to 16, 17 to 20, it is ordinal, then it is better to present it as ordinal. However, as you can see here, we only have two brackets, and that is 13 to 16 and 17 to 20. As if it looks like nominal, so you also need to assess that it doesn't look like ordinal anymore, because of course it's just limited into two, so it is categorical in general. So it would be better if you will present it using also using mode. So actually all the data here, so for socioeconomic status, it is the median. So if we will not consider that we have just a few bracket for age, so it can be presented as a nominal, and then the appropriate is mode. But for socioeconomic status, if it's 1 to 5, so it has, or it can be presented using the median, but we also need to assess how many of the data set falls within each of the given type of ordinal or categories rather. Okay, so let us finalize. So how will we present our profile variable? So in the treatment of the data, usually, so it is written in a sentenced form. So this is to determine or to describe the profile of the respondents in terms of age, sex, relationship status, and socioeconomic status. frequency count and percent distribution will be so if we are reporting for the highest frequency, if you will now show the tabular form, you are actually describing the mode. So there's actually no need to place the mode, the median like that, because if you will report for the highest frequency, if you will present the frequency count and percent, you are already presenting the mode. But it is also your option if you want to place the median later after analyzing it, especially for ordinal data. Okay, let us do that. Or let us first consider what is the life satisfaction. So for this problem, so how are we going to determine the level? So remember that we have the table that shows how to interpret the data, so individually. So we were able to show that in the first topic under this lesson. And after computing for the mean, we were able to determine what is the level of satisfaction of the respondent. So we actually need this. This will serve as our guide for interpretation. And this must also be reported under the treatment of the data. So means, and let us also place the standard deviation just to show also the readers later how spread is the data. So means and standard deviation. So you will place mean and standard deviation. So if you want to show also how many of the respondent has, how many of them have, or how many of them are dissatisfied, satisfied. So you have to count also for the frequency and percent. So which means aside from mean, you are also going to use frequency, count, and percent. So it's similar to our discussion in the profile. So this can also be presented using graphical. So level of life satisfaction is ordinal data. But if you will use the rating and the mean, that is at least interval, or it is the interval data, it is the score. Okay, so to answer what is the level of life satisfaction, we will be using frequency count and percent. This is to present how many of them are satisfied, dissatisfied, strongly satisfied, extremely satisfied, and all other qualitative descriptions in our table or guide for interpretation. And also, we will again go back to the same discussion that what if the data is not normally distributed? If the data is not normal, then instead of mean, the option is, so let's place mean and standard deviation if the data is normal. But we will use median in case that it is not normal, or if it is skewed. So how will we place it here? So to determine the level of life satisfaction of the respondents, mean and standard deviation. So this is our proposal, but we need still to check this. Mean and standard deviation will be computed, the mean will be, or rather the level of satisfaction will be determined using the table for interpretation. So you can place the table for interpretation here. And then next, so this at the moment, this is mean or median, whichever is applicable. Frequency, count, and percent distribution will also be presented. So frequency count and percent distribution will also be presented to show the summary of the level of life satisfaction of the respondents. So do you also intend to show the life satisfaction of the students or to describe later the responses of the students in item 1, in item 2? So you can also do that. But you also need, of course, to state it here that what will you use? Are you going to use also mean? So you also need to place it here. So mean and standard deviation will be computed. The level of satisfaction will be determined using the table for interpretation. Individual or mean responses, mean in each of the items of the questionnaire will also be computed. You can actually place mean and standard deviation in each of the items of the questionnaire will also be computed and described using the same table. So still referring to this. Okay, let's go back. So are we done here? So as mentioned, what is the treatment for level of satisfaction? It is mean and standard deviation if the data is normally distributed. But if it is median, then we are going to consider is good. But if we will go back to our data set, if you can still recall, our n is equal to 120. So by central limit theorem, sufficiently large enough number or sample size is 30 and above, and it also means that it approaches to normal. Okay, so since n is 120, then by central limit theorem, the data approaches to normal. Therefore, Therefore, mean will be used, or mean will be the appropriate measure of central tendency. Okay, so let's go back. So as mentioned, initially we stated that mean and standard deviation or median will be used, which depends on whether the data is normal or skewed. So generally, if we will just look at the problem level of life satisfaction and we are going to use the actual level of life satisfaction, then the data is ordinal. But it is again better to use the computed mean for each of the respondents. So we will be using the mean and not the level. So that's why we have this option whether to use either mean or median, which depends on the shape of the distribution, if it is normal or skewed. But since we know, so in our also discussion on sampling techniques and determining for the sample size, we also made mention there that we can also use central limit theorem to justify why we use mean or why we will use median. Since it is 120 and it is large and it is at least 30, then it means that it approaches normal. Therefore, the appropriate measure is the mean. Therefore, it is safe now to say, as stated in our treatment of the data, that the appropriate is the mean and standard deviation because the number is 120. It is above 30 or it is 30 from, it is above 30. And then in case that it is not above 30, then it means that we have to check for the for our data if it is normal or skewed. So we again have a separate video in checking for the normality, and it will be discussed in a separate video. So this is the needed treatment for our data. Now let us open our data in PSPP. So to open that, you need first to open your PSPP. So let us go to the PSPP. Let's double click our PSPP. File, open. So make sure that you know where did you save your data. So file open. So our data is entitled life satisfaction data. So this is our data. So click that. So click open. This is our data. Let's go to the data view. So for us to answer problem number 1, so our purpose is to answer problem 1 first. So click analyze descriptive statistics, frequencies, and then let's transfer age, sex, relation status, relationship status, and socioeconomic status. So of course, we do not need the mean, the standard deviation. So we are going to uncheck that. So what we will use here is simply frequency. Then click OK. So if we go now to our data, so we have here, we have to check. So we have a missing data, which means that we did not recheck it. So let us recheck our data. So in the variable, in the data view, so it must be the missing is must be equal to 0 if of course you know that there is really no missing data in your data set. So as we can see here, our respondent number 121 is activated. So if we will compare it with 122, so it is darker. So we have to remove this. Right click and clear. Right click. Oops, let us go back. Okay. So all is set, variable view, but we also need to go back to the number that we use. So initially, our topic is that we use 1 and 2. But when I am encoding our data, I failed to do that. So 1 is for not in a relationship. So this, and 2 is in a relationship. So I will remove this. So let me just check this. So this is actually just part of sanitizing the data first, because of course, when we run the data, I found that there is number 2. So which means I use 1 and 2 in this dummy data. So let me just check it. And in a relationship. Click OK. So let's go back. So let's see. Analyze descriptive frequency. Then click OK again. So as you see here, let's bring this down. So this is our initial. It is with the missing 1. So we have valid and valid percent. So the valid percent is the data with the without me that considers only with the data, while 4% it considers even the missing data. But we know that our number of respondents is only 120. That's why we have to go back. So this is now our tables. So this is for the age, sex, relationship status, and socioeconomic status. So we were able to obtain the frequency and percent. So in SPSS, if you again watch that video, you know that this can be edited or it can be copy and pasted. So here, you can actually just simply print it and export it, but it will not look like a table. So the option is you can print it and then you can what do you call this? You can print it and you can just copy it in a separate Microsoft Word. So let us just remove that first. So let us make sure that the data that we are going to save is the final data without the initial. So this is the first table that we did for us to answer problem number 1 on profile. So for now, let us first save this. So file, so it can be exported. And let's place problem 1. Save. So if we will go back to problem 1, the data that we save here, so where is it? Let's go back. So file. Okay, let us give problem 1 and click save so we cannot Save it. Okay, let's just try it. File, print rather. So instead of doing that, file, print. So let us see. So it can actually be printed. And then you can already, of course, see the output and transfer it in your encoded table. Or if you want, so let us also try to select all and try to paste it in Microsoft Word if it is possible. Okay. So this is what I am trying to tell. So it will not look like the table, perfect table that we use. So it is your option to copy and paste it in Microsoft Word first and then try to print it, or you can actually print it and then just encode it in a separate Word wherein it will be placed in the result and discussion of your research paper. So in the next video, so there is of course a continuation for this. We are also going to solve problem number 2. So the level of life satisfaction. But going back to the treatment of the data, we are not yet actually done with this because this only considers the first two problems. So for problem number 3, since this requires inferential statistics, so which means since it requires inferential statistics, we will have again a separate video for this. So for now, thank you for watching, and of course, do not forget to watch the next video for the continuation. So for the whole step-by-step process, so we have link below from part 1 or from the topic 1 until to the last topic. So thank you for watching.